Now all the birds are back. We can hear them chirping in the background. Actually, there's still snow in patches here and there, but it really feels like it's about to be the start of turkey season. And when that comes around, it's time for food plotting. Now, lots of people are going out and they're going to be planting their food plots in the summer, but do you need to be planting your food plots? Should you be planting food plots in the summertime? And I believe that you'd be surprised that most people should not be planting summer food plots. Now, there are the exceptions. There are big operations of food plotting that involve beans and corn, and obviously pretty soon you need to get those seeds in the ground, and that is a perfect alignment for this mid-spring planting that's coming up and getting those food plots in the soil. That first part of the summertime, you have to plant, of course, beans and corn coming up pretty soon. But even then, should you be planting beans? Corn is not a summer food source. That's growing, you're setting that up for the November time, but beans are a strong summer food plot. There are two reasons that I've found, two main reasons that you should be planting summer food plots, and we'll talk about why that maybe you should critically analyze whether you should be planting summer food plots after these 2 points are made. The first point, I go to clients all around the country, of course, a lot of northern clients, a lot of areas where there's low food, low deer populations, big woods, doesn't matter if it's big woods in Kentucky, Pennsylvania, northern Minnesota, but in those areas and with low deer numbers, planting food plots initially in the spring and going into early summer is a great way to establish a pattern of use on your land and let the deer in the neighborhood know that I've got food, I have food on my land, and that you're going to continue that in the fall. Even then, a lot of those northern and big wood settings, you're trying to build the soil with initial food plots and those new food plots. And so buckwheat is a great option. Roundup Ready beans is a great option because you can control weeds. But those are both food sources that I would then till into the ground or plant into roughly August 1st, August 15th in northern settings, end of July, somewhere around there. And I would get that seed in the soil, and you're converting those food plots to an actual fall food source so you can actually help your herd, grow your herd, help your hunt. But establishing those patterns of use is critically important in those areas, and not waiting until the fall. Actually getting something in the ground in the summertime is a great way to establish those first steps to letting the local deer know in the neighborhood that you have food on your land. Now, second, very important, and this goes along with a lot of those same areas, is if you're in a herd building mode. Now, that can be in anywhere. I know areas where does have been decimated. Hunters, just because you have a tag does not mean you should be shooting does. Tags in general are a tool that, of course, the DNR gives you to make educated decisions, make effective decisions on your own, whether you should shoot does or not. But there's areas that does are decimated. There's northern areas where you're trying to build a herd. Back in 99, 98, I started building a herd in the UP of Michigan, low deer numbers. I effectively built that herd over 5, 6, 7 years. And food plots, establishing those food plots is an excellent way. Again, you're not only letting the neighborhood deer know that you have food, but you're letting those does that are looking for critical, high quality summer fawning cover. And along with that comes those fawns, especially those doe fawns that are born. You're looking for multiple food plots on a property so that you're attracting yearling bucks to your property in the fall when they disperse from their mothers approximately 3/4 mile to 1.5 miles away. You're collecting those young bucks. So in a lot of those northern settings where you have high winter mortality on fawns, in fact, the UP of Michigan, you lose 50% of the fawns in a given year, and you only average one fawn going into the fall. So if you do the numbers, that's a 1/4 fawn per doe going into the spring. That might be a buck. And so you're not growing bucks on your herd, you're actually attracting them as yearlings when they disperse. So having those food plots in place in the summertime creates the opportunity for fawning cover, creates the opportunity for does to actually know that you have food on your land, and then you can actually build a deer herd because those does stay. They stay on your land. That's the second great reason to plant a food plot. Now going to third, I'm going to circle back to those does and the fawn, does during the summertime, because in a lot of places that's not necessarily a good thing. A third point about this is that people always say, well, I want to offer, it's not all about the hunt. I want to grow deer during the summertime. I want to give them nutrition. I want to help bucks that are growing their antlers. Well, folks right here in Southwest Wisconsin, and this is common, I'd say 60–70% of the land across the Midwest is some type of agricultural. And we have great food all around us. In fact, on this land, we have hay and alfalfa all around us that the farmer mows several times a year. And we have beans in the distance. We have highly manicured alfalfa. And so if I'm trying to pack a bunch of deer onto these plots every single night, it's a waste of my resources for one thing, because the deer have all they need around here. I cannot affect, in most of the areas I'm talking to you right now, if you're in any type of ag land, you cannot affect the health of the herd at all, one bit. And even if you did put a couple extra pounds on them, you add an inch or two of antler growth, if you're wasting resources in the summertime at the expense of the fall, then you're hurting your ability to actually really literally grow a deer herd. Deer do not need summer nutrition in most areas. In fact, in the UP of Michigan, when I had my property up there, I developed 8 acres of plots, 14 total plots. I had 100% clover going in through the summertime on a rotation where I'd cut the fields in half or thirds, I'd replant them in the fall, always had that clover base. And so I was trying to grow that herd. Once I built the herd to what the capacity I thought was the land, then at that moment, I started shrinking the summer food, because I saw that even when I shrunk that to 1 acre of clover out of 8 acres of plots, and I spread that clover on about 10 to 12 different plots, I still had to mow that clover 3 or 4 times a summer because the deer couldn't keep up with the growth, because they had so much food in the woods. Because it's a low deer density area, there was way more food that they can consume in the woods than they needed on my plots, so they didn't hit the plots during the summertime. Most areas, deer do not need summer nutrition. Now, if you go down into Texas, portions of the Southwest, the Southeast, Georgia, in those hot climates, it might be that deer are really looking for that high moisture content, great food source, whether it's annual clover or beans, whatever it might be, during the summertime, and that helps them during that lean time of drought. But when we're in our areas, most people are not helping the herd. And what it ultimately creates, and we'll talk about this specifically in another video, if you have summer food on your land and you're having trouble with your doe numbers and your overall population, then the first step in reducing doe numbers is not trigger control. The first step is actually reducing or eliminating your summer food. Let those does and fawns range out on the neighboring ag fields, the neighboring properties, the neighboring food plots, so that they can leave your property alone and leave your food plots alone during the summertime. Again, they don't need the nutrition. Because it's summer, they're going to establish those patterns of use. Bucks typically do not reside during the summer where they reside during the fall. There's an annual whitetail shift of mature bucks. I've talked about that for many years. Around here, our bucks that are on the different hunting parcels a lot of times are roughly 1 mile to 3/4 mile away. And we get to see that by hunting different properties and watching the summer deer. So just because you have summer food, you're not going to define bucks anymore, or buck use anymore. And if you have a pile of does, if you're creating high quality fall cover, high stem count cover, that's the exact cover that does and fawns and fawning grounds need during the summertime. So if you have that high quality cover for fall and winter, then you have high quality summer cover for fawning. And if you add summer food, then you will create a traditional summer fawning ground where more and more does, they'll fill your land capacity during the summertime with does and fawns. That keeps a lot of times those bucks away to other lands in the first place. But bottom line, does that are here today are here to stay. So if they're here during the summertime hitting your crops, as soon as that fall forage comes up on your land, they hit it like an army, they lay it to waste, and they stick around for the hunting season, taking away valuable bedding resources of cover for mature bucks and bucks in general. So you can create a great doe factory by having summer food. That risk is real. If anybody has experience looking around at these summer food sources and working with deer on a daily basis, they have to admit that that summer doe factory is actually a real problem. Those does and fawns stay in your land. Again, you're not giving them any more nutrition, because in areas like this, in most areas, they have that nutritional level. And even if you were giving them some nutrition, the risk of having far too many does and fawns on your land going into the fall and taking over your fall cover, taking over your property is far more of a risk and far potentially more dangerous and ineffective for your land and your ability to build a great herd than hunt than actually that little bit of nutrition that you might give them extra during the summertime. There are exceptions, of course, the drought areas, maybe even some extreme northern settings where there's not a lot of food. It's all conifer, all tag alder, all yarding areas. But again, it goes back to the number two reason, the two greatest reasons for planting summer food sources are if you're trying to establish a pattern of use, and then of course, if you're trying to build a deer herd. As soon as your numbers reach capacity, take a critical look at your food plots during the summer if you need to even plant them. Don't fool yourself into thinking that you're providing this great nutrition that's going to take care of the deer all year. In fact, if you're building that summer doe herd and that summer fawning ground, that's an annual problem where you have too many does on your land. They take over space during the fall. Your property becomes a nocturnal property because you have so many does and fawns on the land. It becomes a rut-only hunting property because those bucks will stay elsewhere and they're only going to come on your land during the daylight, during the rut. And you greatly diminish your goals of effectively having a quality deer management herd, a quality herd in general, or a quality hunt. Think of those two great reasons going into this summer to plant. We're thinking about that out here. In fact, we're gonna be frost seeding some switchgrass because I'm working on cover, working on weeds on this land this year. I'm working on lime, pH levels, fertility levels, and then when it comes to time to plant our fall food plots, we don't have that army of does ready and waiting because we've established this pattern of use on this plot. They're not ready and waiting to just browse that green that's coming up in mid-August right to the ground. We get those does hitting and filtering onto this land mid-September. Those bucks, we leave some of those does and fawns on our neighbors. Greatly increases our ability to have a quality herd this fall and a quality hunt. And I urge you to take a critical look at your summer food plots and if you're actually doing good or not.